Hello everybody, my name is Craig Bennett and I'm the founder and owner of TechViewsNup, and I am starting a brand new series for Androids. And in this series I'm going to teach you how to actually code for Android apps. Now, I'm assuming that you never touch any code in your life. I'm assuming that you're probably never even touched the programs. You probably even don't even know what programs to use, which is all fine. In fact, that's why I'm making this. So at first, we're going to be going through very basic stuff. So if you have touched some of this stuff, if you have some experience into this, you might want to move on to some later episodes if I do have them up. But as for right now, we're going to stick to some basic stuff, because unfortunately you have to know the basics in order to actually start coding for some big stuff. Because I mean, let's put it this way, you can actually code in a button, like the image, but if you don't know how to code in the function of the button, it doesn't matter how many buttons you got on a thing, what you name them and everything. If you don't have the function, that the basic function to make it listen for when it's clicked, then you might as well have no button at all. Oh, that's the point of it. It's just annoying someone or something like that. So as far as that goes, let's jump on into a quick bit of advertisement which shows how to support this channel, and then let's jump on into how to code for Android and what do you need. Thank you for sticking around during this quick transition. Now, if you want to help me out, then there's several quick ways. You can easily leave a like, subscribe, and share to this video and my other videos if it helps you out, of course. And if it doesn't help you out, then feel free to leave a dislike, but also tell me why so I can fix it in other videos. But as far as things goes, if you want to help out even further, then you can check out my other videos by clicking the top button. This will take you directly to my channel. And if you are mobile, then the links will be in the description for everything that I'm talking about. And if you want to help me financially wise, as far as getting better equipment or being able to actually hire a staff, then feel free to check out the left button, which is the PayPal, and the right, which is the Patreon campaign. The PayPal is simply a PayPal donation, and the right is simply a Patreon campaign. But without further ado, let's jump right back into the actual video which you came here to see. Welcome back. Now, as far as the hardware, what do you need? You need any type of operating system that Android Studio could be run on. I'm not going to get too deep into this. As far as the processing RAM and all the other stuff, what you need to keep in mind is Android Studio. It's a interesting program. You can use other programs like Eclipse, but Google is pushing their stuff for Android Studio. Now, if you are running a particular company, they might have their own stuff. That doesn't happen that often at all. But for the most part, you're going to see either Eclipse or Android Studio. And I'm thinking you're going to start seeing, especially the way Google is pushing Android Studio and looks like they're pushing out Eclipse. It looks like you're probably going to see Android Studio across the board. Now, with that being said, I don't think Eclipse is ever going to be pushed out. I think they're always going to give the SDK, the newest SDK, out, so you can run it on whatever you want. Unlike iOS, which you today, in case if you are old and you're coding and hadn't coded for Apple for a while, more recently they're pretty much making it where you have to have the Xcode in order to upload it to their marketplace. And yeah. So as far as that goes, you again, the program wise, you need, and I'll have a link below, Android Studio. That's free. You will also need Java stuff that will come up. It will basically ask for it as the things installed on the Android Studio. And the one thing to keep in mind with the Java stuff is I do have a video, and I will link it below, on in case if you run the Android Studio and it gives you, I think it's a JVM error. I'll actually link a video below showing you how to fix that error on Windows. And the other things that you need to have a emulator. What an emulator is basically something to emulate a device. So for example, instead of having to buy a phone, say phone X, I can just emulate it on a computer and go from there. Now it's not going to have all the nice things, but if it doesn't work on the emulator, I can guarantee you it won't work on the actual phone, unless you modify the phone obviously. But if it works on the emulator, it's not a guarantee that it will work on the phone itself. So keep that in mind. If it doesn't work on the emulator, it's not going to work on the phone. But if it works on the emulator, it's not a guarantee it'll work on the phone. I've had that happen once, so it's not a common thing. So go ahead and get an emulator. I'll advise GenMotion and go ahead and getting the plugin for GenMotion for Android Studio once you have it up and running. Sorry about that. But past that, what you will need is Stack Overflow in your browser setup. And the reason why is I'm not advising you to ask questions there. In fact, I'll advise against asking questions there. I've seen it where people ask legitimate questions, legitimate programming questions, and some of them are even questions that are not on that site before. They either don't get answered at all, and some of these are legitimate basic questions that never get answered. So you might never find your help there. And at worst, if someone rates your question bad after so many people who's done that, you can't ask any more questions. So one of the things, and I've even seen it where people had legitimate questions that actually followed the policy that got their questions removed because some of the people who are on that site, let's just say they're trolls. They sit there all day, they mark legitimate questions as bad, and that's it. It's pretty bad. But as far as things goes, there's not too much to pick from. You got that and maybe Yahoo Answers. It's not that diverse on where you can get some help. Obviously, depending on what you're asking is depending on where you can get your help. But what I'll advise is search for the question and answers on Stack Overflow, because there is a lot of good information on there. But again, there's not a lot of good people on there, as far as there's a lot of people who will rate your question bad, even if it's legitimate. And even if everybody says it's legitimate, if so many people mark it as bad and not enough people mark it as good, I've seen battles on that. I even seen battles on my questions where people have done that, and I've even got to the point where I've lost 2 accounts because of that crap, where people mark my stuff bad, and I've seen it with other people where they mark it as bad or just don't answer it. So it's pretty important to know the risks there. It's not a friendly bunch, let's put it that way. But you can also ask things on Yahoo Answers or my site, and I'll try to help you out as best as I can. Now keep in mind I'm only one person at this, so it's best to ask multiple areas if you can. It's also best to ask on a forum. That way you're actually getting some actual answer, and instead of a troll hitting the thing and basically destroying it very easily. Say they have a few accounts that actually has a good reputation, which happens a bit. Instead of having a troll just mark your stuff out just because, you can actually get some help on some forums. there's not many out there, and hopefully there will be some coming up in soon. I know one of them I like to go around is a website called Hack This. You can ask things on there, not so much programming. Maybe they can add something there, but that seems like the most friendliest bunch out of all that I've been to on these type of things. And some of the people on there actually do know about programming, and I tend to be around there once in a while, and you can get some help. So as far as that goes, that's a huge thing to keep in mind, is know where to research your stuff, because you're going to run into problems frequently because you're making something that most likely no one in the world has made before. So you're pioneering a very iffy ground. So that's a huge thing. Now, as far as everything else, so we got your computer, we got your Android Studio, we got the Gen Motion. Let's deal with the SDK. And if you're first starting Android Studio, it will look something different than this. You might have to start a project to make it look like this, or go into settings or whatever. Unfortunately, I can't revert back. But go to Sdk Manager and give it a second or two, and it'll come up. In fact, I might actually already have one up. I don't. And what you need to do is download and install everything on the list that you can. And there's a reason for that. If you download everything, single thing on that list, what will happen is it will allow you to do pretty much everything you can with the Android. Now, unfortunately, I can't show you what it's like when you install it, because I did install everything. It's all up to date. But for the most part, what you need to keep in mind is you just need to accept everything, read through all the licenses, and you should be fine. Now, one thing I'm going to add is look at the API levels on your stuff. So, for example, if I'm developing a Android and I'm looking at, say, Android 2.1, if my API level and my stuff that I'm developing for is API level 4 or Android 1.6, and I'm aiming for 2.1, then my stuff will work because it's a lower level than this. However, if I'm aiming for 2.1 and I am developing for 2.2, which is API 8, and I'm aiming for API 7, then what's going to happen is it's not going to work because it's too high, or at least get functions, or it's not going to even show up at all. In fact, most of the time it won't even show up at all. And that's a huge thing that you gotta keep in mind, is develop for whatever API level that you're going for. And when you're making a new project, what should happen is the thing will ask you point blank what API level you're going for, what version of Android you're going for your target. And it should tell you the percentage of devices out there that uses this version. So that's a huge thing to keep in mind. So if you're developing for something, you can say, well, I can spend a lot of time on this, or I can dumb down some of the features and get a lot more consumers and get more money. Because at the end of the day, we're looking at something that takes months to make. So once you do that, let's clear that, you should be pretty much good to go. You got your computer, you got your Android Studio, you have Gen Motion, the emulator, you have your SDK, you know where to ask your stuff when things come up. Pretty much the only thing left is you actually making something. Oh, and the developer accounts, before I forget. So if you're making a application for Android, like anything else, you need to have a developer account. It only costs a one-time $25 fee for the lifetime account. This may change in the future, but it had it since the start of Android. But with iOS, which is Apple's iPads, iPhones, iWatches, whatever, it's $100 a year to develop for that. That's the reason why applications on iPads, iPhones, and all the other, they cost more. It's not because it's better, it's because you got to pay a bit. I mean, what happens when someone doesn't buy your application, or you ain't getting a lot of turnover for your application on Android? So what? It's $25. What happens if you don't get that with iPhone or whatever else? That's $100, and it could potentially be $200-300. So that's pretty significant. That's very significant. So you gotta have some type of income, and that's the reason why the refund differences between Apple stuff and also Android stuff is vastly different, because Apple is a lot more stricter. You ain't getting your money back. With Android, you can get your money back pretty easily. If you want your stuff back, your money back, you can get it back for like 15 minutes or something like that, unless they change it again in the future. So that's very, very important to note, is the price. It's $25 if you want to put it on the marketplace itself. If you don't want to put it on a marketplace, it ain't going to cost you anything. So that's also something to keep in mind, because I have had companies that came up to me and said, hey, can you make an application for me, but we don't want it on the marketplace. We want to keep it purely to ourselves, and that's no problem. You just sideload it on application on the devices, and you should be fine. Just make sure the unknown source checkbox on the Android is checked, saying it's okay to download from an unknown source and install, and you should be fine. You should be able to sideload it, which is where you install the APK file, which is the application file. Now let's jump on into the code and some of the other things. I'm not going to get too heavy into the code. I'm just going to get some basic TAD stuff, and in our next video we're going to actually work on some actual code. We're going to look at some of the stuff I've done here, get pretty much what this means, what this means, all that other stuff, and that way you know a little bit more, and we're going to then start actually going on to it, because I'm not going to start from scratch to just do a video on it. I'm actually just going to show you my code, and then we're going to build upon that for stuff I have made. So anyways, as far as things goes, what you do need to know is the layout is different from the functionality. So you got two codes that you're working with. With the Android, you're working with what's called XML. Again, that's XML. And with the functionality, we're working with Java. Now, we're not working with pretty much all Java, just what I call Android Java. It's a short segment of it. It's pretty nice. You do need to know some classes and stuff like that, but it's not that heavy. The Android Studio is pretty good on that. Eclipse is way better, but for XML, Android Studio, for my taste, Eclipse is great for Java but horrible for XML, but Android Studio is great for XML but horrible for Java. That's just my opinion. So as far as this goes, what we're looking at is XML. This is the layout. It's pretty simple. You're not going to code the function. You're going to code the layout. So what you're probably going to see when you first crank up your stuff is something like this. And what's going to happen is you can click and drag and drop things. So let's drag and drop a button. And hey, look, we just added a button. Now what this button does is nothing. It's pretty simple, but we can add buttons. So when we want to actually get in a little bit more detail, or if we want to just go straight into the code itself, we can click the text tab, And then we can actually code for a particular part. So when you click on a, say, button or whatever, I advise use the design tab as much as possible. Then go to text and do whatever. It's a lot quicker and a lot easier. And just click on whatever button or layout you want to play with, and you can actually get directed right to it. So that's, for example, ain't really much out of the way. Let's say, for example, I want to code for this button. I click that and it shows it right down here. I want to now code for this line, and it directs it right there. And some of the cool things is the it shows the actual, say for example, with this line, I have on the background a color, and it shows the actual color right here. So for example, with this text, I have the color right here. So it's pretty cool in that aspect with Android Studio. It also even shows you where classes and stuff happen. So as far as that goes, this is pretty much it. I will get more into it, a deeper dive into this, more step by step of what each of these actually mean and how to actually control very finite things with this, which is very important because, as you may notice, I got 8 dp on here, and that means this is going to be smaller than what it would normally be, or bigger, depending on what exactly you're dealing with. And I can control pretty much a lot of things. Now, one thing I'll add in here before we move on is we got something called warnings and errors. This is very, very important. When you're coding, what I'll advise is to keep in mind where the undo button is, where the redo button is, and where the save is, and the refresh. So with the warning, that's not a huge thing. So for example, right here, I got a, right here on the top right of the code, it says I got 3 warnings. It's nothing big. So the first warning is this. It wants me to associate this with what's called a string, which we're going to get into at a later date. Our second warning is the same thing. So it's this. And final is, again, same thing. So I can click on it and it takes me directly to it. And yeah. And then I can even take it and see a little bit more details on all this other stuff. Now, when we get into the actual error, let's remove this. And now we have an error. So we got one error. The warnings go away because we took crucial things out that are very important. And you can see that it says it's suspecting something that's not there. Let's put it back, and the error goes away, and the warning's back. So what happens when we have a warning is you can actually still build the application and run it. It's just fine. In fact, it might work just fine if we went through it right now. It will look just like it is now, be just fine. But an error, you can't build an application. You have to fix that. In other words, the thing won't work at all on any device. So that's very, very important to note, is the difference between error and a warning. Also know what's causing the error and warning, because sometimes you run into a problem where you start coding in something and then move to another area. And I'm not talking about on the same code. You move from one code to another code, and all of a sudden you just end up having a whole bunch of errors, ID errors usually, and you got to figure out what's causing it. Sometimes it could be the name of a file. So for example, when you're uploading images, you can't have any capital letters for the image. There's a couple things there, but if you break that rule, then what happens is you get a bunch of errors across the board, and it's a pain to figure out if you forgot what you just did. There is ways to find it, but for the most part, you need to keep that in mind. Is what's causing the error, because it's not always on the same page. So as far as things goes, that's pretty much about it. And let's move on into another thing. Do I got to manifest up? Let's get into strings real quick. Strings, this is also XML. Strings is very important. So for example, if I want to use, say, hello world in a text field multiple times, instead of typing in hello world each and every time, I can type in @strings / hello world. I'll get into this in a later video because we will use strings. There is no ifs, ands, or buts on that. I use strings a lot in my stuff. It's very useful. So, and I'm not talking about like if you use it more, say for example, where I got this. I got hello world. This it's only on this one page right now. I probably will have on multiple pages, but even if it's on like five of these, then it's not a big deal. It's, you know, I can type it there. But if I got on like every single one, then I wanted to do a string. On top of that, there is things on Android Studio where you can actually tell it to automatically add this to every single one, so which is pretty nice. And for some instance, you actually get some strings like this. App name, this will go into the manifest, which I'll get into in a second. And so we got to name the application. So instead of and this is very important. So for example, if I went and had this say hello world on almost every single page, or whatever amount of pages I want, instead of going to every single one and changing it to say something else, if I want it to, I can just change it right here, and it changes it on all of them that has that string defined. That's also the other reason why you will want that. Now, as far as that goes, there's other reasons why I use strings. I've used strings where I had code actually make it where you go from one page to the next. It'll take data from what in real world what we call when you go from, say for example, this to this. That's an activity, but I'm gonna call pages, screens, whatever, because average people, I mean, it's like almost like viruses. Yeah, you're gonna get some idiot and hackers. It's almost like you're gonna get some idiots who says that's not a virus, that's a I don't know, a worm, or you're gonna get someone say that's not a hacker, that's a cracker. Well, the average person's not gonna, define every little thing. It's just a broad term. So if you've got problems with that, you might want to keep that one in mind. So as far as these pages goes, what I use some of my strings for is I'll do a setting where the person will press the setting on one page, then when they go to a separate page, it'll take that information, bring it over, and I'll tell what to show, what not to show, and all that stuff. Not necessarily what information you need to put down as far as text-wise, but should it show this picture or this picture? Should this be checked or this be checked? Things like that. And you'll put something like true, false in the strings, so it's very easy. So you'll say if person checked X checkbox, then put in string true, and then if not, then false, or nothing at all, or don't even make a string. And then what will happen is when the person gets to the next part, it'll say if string says true, then do this. And that way it says, oh, the person actually did click true or click the checkbox, so let's do this on this other page. I'll get into that later on. That's not used that often, at least for me right now, but it might be used a little bit more later on. So as far as that goes, the Android manifest, that's interesting in itself. So real quick, depending on things, the one thing I want to mention is when you're going from Eclipse to Android Studio, you're going to have to relearn a lot of this. So this is pretty important, because one thing I advise is if you're already in Eclipse and you're just started, you might as well just go to Android Studio. But if you're hardcore in Eclipse, wait a while, but learn Android Studio. It's going to be a lot easier if you play with Android Studio and learn it. And I'm not talking about, oh, I know where this button is. I'm talking about actually knowing things. So anyways, the manifest is right here, and basically this shows what opens up and everything. In fact, this is perfect. I actually have to build this up a little bit more. So yeah, but as far as things goes, basically what this shows is, and I might make a splash screen later on. Oops, that's bad. That's very bad. So what this shows is when the application launches up, it needs to go and start this class. And what is a class? It's Java stuff. So for the most part, what's going to happen is, and there's two ways to switch classes, which you're going to hear a lot. Again, class is just the Java stuff, the functionality side of things. There's two ways. One, this is what I'm going to use for the most part, is the manifest. The second way is through the switching from one class to the next. It's easy, but I prefer to manifest that way. As you know, I got multiple classes here, but I don't know which links to which, and I won't know that from here. But also, I don't know how many I already have set up, and I can see here I don't have any besides the main set up. So if I even want to make a splash screen, you need to actually mark this. But as far as things goes, for the other classes, I prefer to do it in here. I'm just going to tell you, if you don't like to have your classes through here, there is a way to do it through the actual class system. But for me, it's just easier and better to do it in here, and that's just a personal opinion. So anyways, in a clash, again, we're dealing with functionality. So when in the Android manifest, it says when launch, pull this class up. This class says when it's activated, it needs to set content view to this, which is, do I even have the layout up? It is this. Give it a second or two. Oh, I don't even have anything on it. Awesome. So as far as that goes, it says pull up that, and then from here do everything else. I'm not going to get into this until the next video when we're going to talk about buttons and all the other nice stuff. But for the most part, you're going to see a lot of my stuff. I don't even have that program, but you're going to see a lot of the buttons program within here. The other things program within here, the sleep timers, the ending one class, starting another one, some of the other things. But this is pretty basic. Again, I'll get into this into a later video. Just remember the layout is XML. Remember the functionality is Java. Remember there are strings. Remember that there's an Android manifest, which you can use in many ways. Also remember that there is rules when it comes to pictures and audio. Pictures, let's get into that real quick. The one thing that you need to keep in mind is pictures, they cannot start with a capital letter, and I don't think you can have a capital letter at all within the picture itself. The pictures have to be a certain size. I don't know off the top of my head, but one thing that you got to keep in mind is sounds. You need a raw file. I'll get into this into a later date, but you need something called a raw file, or a W, and the sound could be MP3 or WAV, probably some other stuff, but those are the ones I know that worked for a fact. Now, as far as some of the other things, you need to keep in mind the Android icons. So in Eclipse, you were able to actually load the icon within the thing, and actually the thing will just apply it, load a picture up, and the thing will apply it to the icon, which I think they should do with Android Studio. If I'm missing a setting, then please tell me right now if you actually do know this stuff, because it'll be a pretty awesome thing. But know that dealing with the icons, if you don't have that ability where when you start a new project, you can't tell that this is what your icon needs to be. If you don't have that ability, you have to actually go to each and every one of these, look at the sizes, and size your picture to that, and do that. I've used Paint. It's easy. And as far as everything else, that's pretty much about it. Now, again, the top right, this is your friend. This will tell you if there's any errors. This will tell you if there's any warnings. One of the great things with Android Studio is you can actually go right-click anywhere, go down, Analyze, Inspect Code, Whole Project, press OK, let that run, and it will tell you everything wrong, or just about everything wrong, with the project itself, the code-wise. And it's pretty nice. It's very nice. Instead of actually having to hunt some of this stuff. So, for example, like here it says some portion that's never used. Let's go to something else. So we got some spelling mistakes, or what it think it is a spelling mistake. It might not be. We got a we have a default templates. We can actually go and click here to fix that. We have unused resources. Some of this. But anyways, we got a bunch of things. So as far as things goes, I'll advise you to play around with it, get familiar with it, but in our next video we're going to get a little bit more advanced. I'm going to basically explain how to make a basic Hello World application. This will basically be an application where you can go and actually click a button, and like this one, and it will actually change the text. And on top of that, one thing I'll actually get into is some of the class stuff, as far as switching from one class to another. I think I'm gonna do that next little show, and we can get into some other things too if there is any questions between now and want to make my next video. But anyways, this has been Craig Bennett, founder, owner of TechViews and Help, and hope that it's been a very informative video for you. Hopefully this helps you out in making your own applications, and hopefully this is a start to a great new series that will help you and also myself out. One thing I did leave out is how to change the actual background to this. It looks completely different when you first start, unless if they massively change this. What you need to do is go down to File, Settings, give it a second or two, search, and go for color. And what we're looking for is color, color and font. And you can actually switch it right here. And if you want to get a little bit more advanced, you go to each one of these and do that. So right now I got mine as Dracula. So yeah, it's whatever they have for default. But you can get a little bit more advanced on each one of these. One thing I'm probably going to do, especially with this, is make that a bright green. So you can actually put in a hex code right here. In fact, can I? No. Just doing something on the side. Grab the hex code right here. Go down to here. Oh, it's not going to play nice. So something like that. That's pretty nice. To me, it's nice. You might not be. And one of the reasons why I do that is that way I can leave notes myself, and I can actually see the notes, which I'm actually having some problems with some of the stuff. Like here, I should be able to see the actual notes. It should be able to stand out, which they don't, unfortunately. And yeah, so now we can actually see our notes, some of the notes I actually left myself on this. But anyways, again, this has been Craig Bennett, founder and owner of Tech Reviews and Help. And if you like this video, then please leave a like, please subscribe, and please share. And if you didn't like them, please leave a dislike and also tell me why. And that way I can help you guys out better in the future videos. And also, if you do have any questions, please feel free to leave that in the comment section, and I'll try to cover it either in the comment section or in future videos, and that way it helps out everybody. But hope you have a great day, and please feel free to check out techreviewsnup.com and our Patreon campaign.